It is with great honor to welcome back our keynote speaker for this afternoon. John N. Doggett is an award-winning senior lecturer at the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin. John teaches courses about entrepreneurship, global competition, and sustainable energy in UT's M.B.A. program. John has taught courses and seminars on entrepreneurship and competitive strategy in Austria, Chile, China, Ghana, Hong Kong, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, Portugal, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, and Thailand. John practiced law for 7 years in Connecticut and California. John was a management consultant with McKinsey & Company in Washington, D.C. and Copenhagen, Denmark. John founded an international management consulting firm that had helped clients in 25 countries make the transition from century planned to market-based economies. John also co-founded a Spanish-language sports programming company that had an exclusive 3-year contract with the NFL to produce programs in Spanish. John is a co-author of When We Are the Foreigners, What Chinese Think About Working with Americans, which was published in 2011. He's also the co-executive producer of Shakespeare on the Range, a 2017 short movie about Louisiana prisoners learning how to become actors in the play Macbeth. John received his B.A. degree from Claremont McKenna College in 1969, his Juris Doctor degree from Yale Law School in 1972, and his M.B.A. degree from Harvard Business School in 1981. John is married to Hai-Ping Tang, a senior product manager for Samsung Electronics America. Let's all give a warm welcome to Mr. John Doggett.
It's good to be back, but I must say I can't imagine how difficult it had to have been for Scott's father to come up and accept that award. I was sitting at the table with him and talking with him, and we just had a very heartfelt conversation. And Scott was an amazing young man, and his father and his siblings are also amazing people to be able to handle this having happened so short in the past. Well, I'm back, and normally that's not the case. People having one taste of my bad jokes and crazy ideas say, whoever's responsible for inviting Doggett, don't do that again. But I'm kind of worried about you folks, because before I'd gotten back to Austin, you were asking me if I could come back the next year. I figured out I better work hard and make sure you don't do that again for next year. But there's lots happened, and I also have one new joke. And if I forget it, say, what's the joke? Because I will remember this joke. It's actually a good one for once. Let's get started. And it's going to be, there we go. And this clicker is supposed to work. So, when I was growing up, people told me there was this Chinese curse that may you live in interesting times. And about 17 years ago, I married a woman who was born, raised, and educated in China. And so I asked her about the curse, and she said, I never heard about this. So I did a little research, went to Google, which is what we all do, and found out there's nothing Chinese about it. And the European and American created this story about being a Chinese curse in the 1930s, so it's not Chinese at all. But it is a curse, or a blessing. We are living in some of the most interesting times I've ever seen. And I'm going to spend time talking about what's going on, and hopefully a lot of it will be relevant to what you're going to do with your business, what you're doing with your business. Second, I couldn't come back without our favorite picture of an ugly baby. Now, it's really important for those of you who weren't here last year or 3 years ago, whenever I was first here, is to understand this. This is not a real person. I hope. But we've all seen ugly babies. And what do we do when we see an ugly baby? We're very nice to the parents, because the parents know their baby is ugly. And the parents are hoping that it will grow out of it. And we're all saying, oh, what a cute baby, and we pinch the cheeks, and we try to say everything nice. Even the real estate business, I bet all of you have some ugly baby buildings. More importantly, you have some ugly baby clients, so hopefully ex-clients. And in our business of being business people, we have to have the ability to see things as they are, not as we want to see them. To see and look at the data and say, okay, what are we going to do with this? Versus, I don't like it, so I'm not going to recognize it. And so I think about Scott's father. Grieving, and he's grieving, but capable of talking about the blessing and the gift his son was to him and to everybody else. That's how Ugly Baby Glasses works. We talked about strategic inflection points last year, and those are changes in the world that are permanent. They're not the normal up and down of interest rates or occupancy rates or real estate. They're when new things happen. They represent a fundamental change in how the world operates, and we're not going back. And so everything I'm going to talk about for the rest of this talk is about some strategic inflection points that I think are very important that will be of interest to you. And if they're not, get up and leave. Okay? And by the way, that's not my joke. Okay? So I'm from Texas, born in California but raised in Texas. And we all know about shale. And in fact, I remember when people were talking about the Eagle Ford. I didn't know what that was. I thought that was a new Ford truck dealership. But Eagle Ford is one of the big shale plays or areas in South Texas. And what the chart shows is the impact shale oil and gas is having on America. We already are starting to export oil, but we're going to become a net exporter of oil. We will no longer import anything from foreigners, except possibly from Mexico and Canada. And this is a profound change in how things have been for America. So we've had presidents since Eisenhower saying the United States must become independent. We have to stop importing oil because that has an impact on who we are and what we do. We're going to be independent in the next few years. But remember the old saying of being careful what you wish for, because it might come true. Right as we, because of shale oil and gas, are becoming independent, we have electric cars and hybrid cars. And so if you look at this, and this is from OPEC, the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, they're saying the amount of vehicles in the world is going to double, but the actual consumption of oil per vehicle is going to stay the same and then go flat. And this is OPEC, which has an interest in overstating it. There's a good possibility that by 2040, the number for transportation will be virtually zero. Why? In 1983, in the People's Republic of China, it was illegal for anybody like us to own a vehicle. If you weren't in the military or not in the government, you couldn't own a vehicle. Today, China is the largest car-owning country in the world with the fastest growth. And earlier this year, the Communist Party of China said, as of 2018, anybody who wants to sell a car in China must have 10% of their vehicle, 2019, 10% of the vehicles must be electric vehicles. In 2020, must be 12%. They're the largest car country in the world. And so what we're starting to see is that everybody said, well, we're going to get there eventually when it makes sense. They're saying, holy crap, if we want to have access to this market, we have to do it. And so I think it's highly likely by 2040, the overwhelming majority of vehicles on this planet, at least in the United States and China and Western Europe, are going to be electric, or electric dominant with some hybrid, which has a significant impact on oil. And we'll get to another aspect of what's going on in transportation that will directly affect your business as commercial real estate people. But in the interim, something new has happened. This is a chart showing you where lithium is. If you don't know about lithium, you never heard about my wife's Samsung Note 7, which exploded in airplanes all the time because the lithium batteries were messed up. Lithium is what's at the heart of all battery technology right now. And maybe eventually they'll come up with something to replace it, but if you have a Tesla, you have a lot of lithium. If you have a smartphone, you have a lot of lithium. In fact, when I came in here, have you seen the sign on the door? You must wear a coat and no cell phones. Well, I don't have a cell phone, I have a smartphone, so I guess I'm okay. But how did that work in the past? You have to check your cell phone at the door? I'm from Texas. We don't even check our guns at the door. I mean, really. That's not my joke, by the way. It's a good one. Chile, which is an amazing country, has, 5, 6, 700, 800 years worth of reserves of lithium? What are the chances that we're still going to be using lithium 100 years from now? What are the chances anybody here is going to know what's going on 100 years from now? Look at this. This is quarterly revenue. This is where it starts to get interesting in terms of thinking about retail and thinking about industrial and thinking about commercial. Over the years, we talked about Amazon as, they have some interesting stuff to buy. But Amazon is now emerging as an incredibly powerful player on the global economy. And in a lot of different ways, Amazon is the bell cow of a massive strategic inflection point. And that inflection point is people deciding they want to buy stuff online, they don't want to go to a physical place. I was talking to one of your members about a picture I wish I'd put in this deck. My wife and I are in Portsmouth, Maine, and we're standing at a corner downtown. It's a small city, 100,000, and there's this wonderful location, retail location, big windows. It used to be a furniture store, and there's a sign saying, "We're relocating to online." We're relocating to online. And it's a two-story place, and it's perfectly located. It's gorgeous, and it was empty, and the landlord is hoping that somebody else is going to want to take the place. But this is a revolution. This is what a strategic inflection point looks like. You don't close down something, like at Main and Main, that's perfect corner, to go online unless something big is happening. And something big is happening. Part of it is just age. A lot of us, I just turned 70 last month. And when you're on your way to getting to 70, you don't want to talk about your age. And when you make it, you say, what the heck, I'm 70. That's kind of cool. I never knew it felt this good to be this old. But I have kids at my university and at every university in this country who were born in the year 1999 and 2000. And she's just shaking her head saying, oh my goodness. Born. And they're very important for business because they have a lot of money. And in 4 years, they're going to be working for you. In 8 years, you're going to be working for them. These kids. And so there is a revolution going on, strategic inflection going on, how people do stuff, and these slides are going to help you understand that. This is Amazon's revenue. This is Amazon's revenue. The little spikes are Christmas. But you don't have to have an M.B.A. or be a financial analyst to look at the line. This is unprecedented. This is unprecedented. And if, by the way, if you remember the previous slide, see if it goes backwards. It doesn't go backwards. It doesn't go backwards. Anyway, the previous slide, Amazon's revenue is twice of that of Microsoft. It did go back finally, okay? And how they're making money is fundamentally different. This shows their profit from Amazon Web Services. And if you look at the note in the corner, which I can't see, it says, 300%? Of their profit comes from Amazon Web Services. Now let's think about that. We've all heard about AWS. In fact, I walked into the Atlanta airport yesterday and it had AWS. Amazon Web Services is a way to compete that we've not seen before. Amazon sells a lot of stuff online. They have a bunch of servers. And they need it. And they decided, we have excess capacity because we never want people not to be able to buy things because our servers don't have enough capacity. And so they supersize their servers. And somebody said, maybe 10, 15 years ago, why don't we sell the excess capacity of stuff we already own for virtually nothing? And that's what they started doing. And now their income and their revenue from Amazon Web Services selling excess capacity on the servers they need to run their business is alone a Fortune 500 company. And there's a company in San Antonio, Texas that was competing with them called Rackspace, but all they did was provide servers. All they did was fuel the crowd, and they've been collapsing. How do you compete with somebody who's selling excess capacity at a small price? And that's what we're starting to see. We're starting to see a lot of that happening. And the Amazon model is one you have to study because it has great implications for commercial real estate. Because what we know is that Amazon is now one of the biggest buyers of industrial space. When they were starting, they said, what we need to do is to make sure we only have a handful of warehouses and a handful of states so we don't have to pay sales tax. And then one day they woke up and said, forget about sales tax. We'll pay sales tax. What we need to do now is have warehouses everywhere so we can be as close as possible to the customers so we can deliver products as quickly as possible. And their goal, by the end of this decade, is to be able to have Prime, which right now is 2-day delivery, is to have Prime represent 1-day delivery. And then by 2025, have same-day delivery. That's their goal. Which means they have to do what? They have to have warehouses everywhere, and they have to use all this excess capacity for their servers and their data analysis to do what they're doing now, which is to figure out what you need before you need it so they can pre-position it so when you order it, it shows up the same day or the next day. So for you in commercial real estate, it's going to be great for a while. Now, if you're in malls, well, it's going to be great for a while because you can repurpose those malls into warehouses, okay? And then we have Netflix. And think about Netflix. Remember the good old days when you got this little envelope in the mail 2 or 3 days later with the DVD? And they said, you can't do that anymore. We're going to separate that and do streaming. Everybody went berserk and they lost 800,000 customers. Netflix is transforming how we think about not just entertainment, but how we think about competition. Because what Netflix was looking at is our business is selling other people's stuff, or renting it or leasing it. That's a commodity. We're kind of like the telephone company. Telephone company has the wires or has broadband cable, but do they have any control over what you're using your telephone for? No. So if we stay in this commodity business of just leasing or renting or shipping other people's stuff, at some point, it's going to be a race to the bottom, and prices and profits are going to go to the bottom. So what did they decide to do? They decided to get into the production business. So the 10 most popular things that people watch online, 9 of them come from Netflix. And if you look at these are things that are not coming from Disney, which is a monster in its own space, or Sony Pictures. This is coming from Netflix. This is a company that started off shipping red envelopes. And now they're a massive player. And if we look at it, look at the growth. Now here's the scary thing about it. There's nothing physical that they're selling. They're selling access to streaming video. And as telephone companies and as broadband companies increase the throughput, that just makes Netflix business better. They say, thank you for making the pipes larger so we can send more things through the pipes. This year, 43% of Americans who look at movies online use Netflix. This year at night, close to 50% of all the use of broadband in this country are people streaming Netflix. So they've gone from sending envelopes and having you send the DVDs back to now a major entertainment hub. And so the real question is, what do they do next? And here's your 43%. And what they do next is they're growing around the world. So their growth potential is significant. Now, I'm not authorized or qualified to give investment advice, but I can tell you the big mistakes I made. And one of my big mistakes is that when Netflix irritated everybody and 800,000 people dropped them in one quarter and their price went down, we did not buy. Carl Icahn did, and in 1 year he made $400 million as the price went back up, because people said, they're going to figure it out. People want their Netflix, and the price went back up. So here's a message. When people react irrationally and the price goes down, but if you look at the fundamentals of the business and there's no reason for the price to go down, buy. And if it doesn't work, don't call me, okay? Another company, Google. These are all the things that Google does, and they're in the hundreds of millions. But the one thing that stands out the most is on the far right to you, people watch 1 billion hours of video on YouTube every day. I don't know about you, I can't get my head around that. But would you like to be in a business like that? No, by the way, it's all free. And so one of the things I do, both as a business professional and as a businessman, is think about, why would somebody give away 1 billion hours of YouTube viewing for free? And the answer is because of what they learn about you and what they understand. All of these companies, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Apple, Microsoft, are in the business of trying to understand you better than anybody has ever understood anything in the history of the world. So I'll give you an example. I was at the Florida State's Real Estate Trends Conference. I saw a few of you there. Actually, I didn't. Last month, or actually it was this month. No, it was last month. What month? This is November, it's last month. And the last speaker was a woman, senior vice president for MasterCard. And as she started talking, and her job was to interpret all the data that MasterCard has, as she started talking, everybody was saying, oh my goodness. She said MasterCard processes 142 million transactions an hour. Now think about that, an hour in the United States. And her job is to use that data to try to figure out what's going on. So think about it. If everybody has a MasterCard, they have your social security number, they have your credit, they have your address, they have a lot of stuff about you, how much you make. And she said, oh, my job is to strip your name and address, we keep your zip code, and then use that data to help us understand what's going on. They said, she said, know more about the economy than the federal government because they send out surveys. We're looking at 142 million data points an hour. And so from a real estate standpoint, she was mentioning just in passing, of course, at a real estate conference, that they do have a product that if you have a commercial building that had a tenant that was selling stuff, retail, they have the ability to show you by the hour, by the day, by the week, by the month, by the year, what was selling in that building. And because it's all selling to MasterCard customers, who was buying what? So here are the buildings in your city where people go to buy this, with this demographic background. Is that valuable information? That's valuable to you as folks in the real estate space. It's even more valuable to the folks who want to lease space. And they have that data. I'm sure Visa has the same data. American Express has the same data. We didn't have that before. I don't know about you. But any building you have, if it's retail, if people are using credit cards, MasterCard can tell you exactly who's buying what when. How many people bought ceviche, if it's a restaurant? Because they have that information. They have that information. My whole purpose of being here is to share with you some things that are going on that I think are really significant so you can think about how do I take advantage of them. Because these are things that are not going to go away. They're going to become more intense. How do I take advantage of them? Oh, Google, Street View. You probably thought Street View was something just for Atlanta or the U.S. The only place they don't have Street View is where countries are telling them to stay away or where it's not safe. These people are dead serious. They're dead serious about getting as much data as possible. And so one of the things that I'm seeing when I look at Google is they have Google Maps, they have Waze, and they're making a big investment in the use of data for transportation. And so now when you talk to GM, you talk to Mercedes, you talk to Chrysler, you talk to Ford, they're all saying, we're not going to let Uber control or Lyft control the robotic car, the driverless car business. We're going to be in that business ourselves. And Google says, we're going to make a lot of money selling you data about what the people in those vehicles are doing. Because the goal is eventually for all the vehicles not only to have navigation software, but for the vehicles to be talking to each other. And guess whose network they're going to be talking to each other through? Google's network. So that's why they're giving all that stuff away for free, so they can get all that information about us so they can do a better job of figuring out how the system's going to work. The target of this slide is to talk about Twitter, but what I think is interesting is Instagram. How many of you use Instagram? Got a bunch of old people here. I mean, look at this. If you have children that you still talk to them about Instagram. My students, my undergraduate students, 1999, 2000, born in, that's their manufacturing date. They look at the world differently. And you're going to have to learn how to look at the world differently. Because again, they buy things, they rent things, they go places. And your clients, your customers, try to do business with them, which means you have to understand them. Instagram has come out of nowhere to be a monster. And a lot of people, especially our age, don't know what it is. How about WeChat? Anybody know what WeChat is? 1, okay? 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, WeChat is the WhatsApp from China. It is the product of a company called Tencent, as in 10 cents, right? Why do they call themselves that? I have absolutely no idea. They're Chinese. But anyway, they call themselves Tencent. They are massive. Tencent and Alibaba are on the same scale as Amazon, Google, and Facebook. And most of us don't know about it. But they have some great products. But look at what's there and look at Twitter. And just think about what Twitter would be like if the president wasn't using it. They'd be dead. He's the only reason anybody uses Twitter anymore. So what did the president say this week or this day? Okay? And they're still dying. Speaking of Facebook, look at this. It's last year. How many of you have commercial clients or industrial clients or any clients that have seen this type of revenue and profit growth in 1 year? This is what a strategic inflection point looks like. These are unprecedented numbers for a product that's free, unless you want to pay money to it. And so what the business model is all these guys and gals are saying, we're not going to charge you for the use of our product because we want as many as possible people to use our product so that advertisers and retailers and everybody else says, I want to get access to these users. We'll make money on the other side. And so we're going to see much more of that. Now, I'm not recommending that you in commercial real estate tell your customers to give stuff away for free. But I want you to understand why this phenomenon is so significant, so important. They're giving away stuff that newspapers used to charge for. Remember newspapers? You know? So I got a crazy thing. I love the Wall Street Journal. And since I'm an educator, I get an educator's discount. And I just wanted it online, digital version. And they said, well, if you want just digital, we'll charge you $300. But if you are willing to also take the paper physical subscription, we'll charge you $110. Okay, let's see. So just digital $300, but paper and digital. Okay, fine. Send me the paper. I'll do vacation hold, month after month after month because I don't want it. But they're trying to keep up their physical subscription numbers, and so they're subsidizing it, which is crazy. Mark my words. This is something that you can take to the bank. We won't know what a newspaper is in 10 years, a physical newspaper, because it won't make sense to deliver it unless it's the local newspaper. And if you are in the business of advertising with flyers, stop it. You don't need to do that, at least not for the young kids. Maybe for the old people like me you do, but for the young kids you don't need to do that. You can save a lot of money that way. Speaking about Black Friday and Thanksgiving, this is unprecedented. I mean, I just can't understand why people don't want to get up at 3:30 in the morning to go to the mall to fight with people over something that's not their size that they're going to return when they realize they don't want it. And what's happened is people are waking up and they're saying that doesn't make sense. Now, my wife and I have had a community marriage for over 3 years. She's at Samsung in New Jersey. And it's been interesting to learn about New Jersey. It's a good place not to be from. In the 3+ years she's been there, she's had 7 tires blow out because of potholes. More tires than I've had in my entire life in other parts of the world. New Jersey has the most unique, curated potholes that you're ever going to see. It's crazy. But they're really in trouble because their malls are collapsing. Retail is collapsing in New Jersey, and there are a lot of reasons for it, but New Jersey is a great model of what to do wrong in retail. Okay? Look at these numbers, but here's where it gets interesting. And if my father's a minister, and if I was going to say my sermon is based on, it's going to be based on the great book of college football. I know we have some Georgia fans here, all right? Go Dogs. And we have some Auburn fans here. Go Eagles. When Georgia had an unpleasant experience at Jordan-Hare Stadium, did Georgia blame Auburn? They weren't happy about Auburn. But they weren't blaming Auburn, saying they didn't have a right to score 4,000 points on us in the first half. And when Tennessee lost to everybody, they weren't blaming the other people for beating them. Would they lose to Troy or somebody? Who lost to Troy? LSU lost to Troy. It's like, you lost to Troy, then Troy lost to South Alabama. I mean, excuse me? How does that happen? But in every single case, the response is, it's not the team that beat us who's at fault. We let them beat us. And if we're going to do something about it, we're not going to tell them, don't fight hard next time. We're going to say, we got to get our act together. And if we can't get our act together, we'll get rid of our coach and find somebody new. Get better players. Get better facilities. This is football. This is serious. It's not like business where we can whine. And so we as Americans have to do, and I've said this last year and I'll say it again, is we have to stop whining about the fact that we have competition from other countries. Because you're not going to win a football game from whining. You're going to win a football game because you fight harder, you get better players, you coach them better, you get better coaches, and you play harder on the field. And that's what we have to do. And the reason I'm saying that is look at this. You've probably never heard of this. Singles Day. I mentioned 10 Cent. There's another company called Alibaba. Probably heard of Alibaba. They invented Singles Day about 5 years ago. It dwarfs Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Dwarfs. And that's just in China. My friend, Singles Day is going to come here. Singles Day is going to be like Mother's Day. It's going to be like Valentine's Day and Black Friday, all created by retailers to get people to buy more. And they have become something that we cherish. I mean, the idea of not being able to go to a Walmart at 5:30 in the morning on Friday after Thanksgiving is something that a lot of people can't imagine. I can imagine not doing that. But it gets more interesting. Have you guys heard about 5G? Okay. How many of you have heard about 5G? Okay. A handful of you. 5G is the next standard for wireless communications. And to make it very simple, 5G will have, you'll have smartphones that'll get more faster throughput than any of your broadband connections right now. And what I say on my slide is it's 1 gigabyte. In fact, what we think is going to happen by 2020 is it'll be 3 to 4 gigabytes we'll start off with. Remember Google Fiber, and they were talking about Google Fiber here, Google. They've stopped talking about it because this is not fiber. There's fiber running through the middle, but this is through what we now call cell phone pods. This technology has been worked on, is being worked on right now by AT&T and Intel, by Qualcomm. It is being tested. It does work. It's going to be commercialized. And when it's commercialized, what it's going to do is completely revolutionize how we get our information. And if you are Time Warner or Comcast or all the big cable companies, you're sweating big time because none of you have that throughput right now with all the investment you have in the ground. And if you're a carrier, you're really getting excited because if I can get 2 or 3 gigabytes through my smartphone, then what don't I need? And there's a long list of things that I don't need. And what can I do? And what happens if I can get 2 or 3 gigabytes per second in my car? What happens? That's what a strategic inflection point looks like. We are not going back to the day I grew up in where there was a phone, it was black, had a rotary dial, it was physically attached to the wall, and you tripped over it on a regular basis. And they charged you by the minute to even look at it. That day is over forever. That's what a strategic inflection point looks like. Let's talk about America for a little while. Last time I talked about the president and how my friends who are Democrats were in shock. They still are. That's fine. But what I love about the conversation the Democrats are having right now is they're starting to say, maybe we had a role in the election of the president. Maybe it's partially our fault. But what's important is for us to put on ugly baby glasses and get away from partisan politics and look at the balance sheet of this country. If you look at the balance sheet, red is not good. Red is not good. And there's a lot of red. In fact, if you look at the only green, it was during the time when Bill Clinton was president, but 2 things were happening. A, remember Y2K? And irrational exuberance, and the stock market going crazy, and the internet bubble. And we also changed how we accounted for GDP and how we accounted for government revenue. So that is kind of what we call an adjustment in how we do accounting more than in credit for that particular time. Look at this. We are in debt, big time. In fact, our debt level is approaching the debt level at the peak of World War II. We have been in Afghanistan for 17 years, and that is a war. But it is a war that has, for the families that are involved, significant consequences, but for the rest of us, minimal consequences. But we are seriously in debt, and it's getting worse. If you look at the data, if we continue spending the way we're spending, we're somewhere in the 2030s are going to pass our indebtedness for World War II. This is serious. This is something nobody's talking about. The president tweets about this and that. Congress does whatever Congress does. I can't figure out what they do. But nobody is focusing on how serious of an issue this is. And it gets even more interesting. Come on, work for me. Look at how our entitlement spending has increased over the past few years. We've gone from a capitalist country to a socialist country without realizing it. The numbers are stunning. I mean, the numbers increase in debt has gone up, 400%? Increase in entitlements, can't read the number from the side, but you can see what's going on. And it's scary stuff. But what's more frightening about it is nobody's talking about it. There should be as much energy to deal with this issue as there is to get rid of a football coach who can't produce. But there's not. And that doesn't make sense. I love football. And we're on our third coach in 5 years. And we're hoping he does well. We're paying him $15,031 a day. And if he doesn't do well, we'll be on our fourth coach in 5 years. But for debt, there is not the same energy. Why not? What's wrong with us? Because the implications are significant. Look at this. We are a country that is becoming addicted to government handouts. Now, it's not really government handouts, it's our money that's going into the government's pocket and then it gives it back to us. But look at this number. Look at the percentage of Americans now, what, 35% of their income comes from entitlements? Where does that go if the trend line continues? At what point do we get to a point where the America that we know and love and care about that makes it possible for us to do what we're doing doesn't exist anymore? My friends, we're nearing that point. I said that last year. It's getting more significant, and not much has changed. Now, good things, some things are starting to change. The tax bill of some form will pass, and the most important thing about the tax bill is that corporate income taxes will go down so that we are competitive with the rest of the world, with the intelligent world. Because there's been this mythology that if we raise taxes on corporations, that means it's going to come out of the pocket of shareholders. I don't know about you. You raise my costs, I'm going to pass it on if I can to my customers. So since we pay all the taxes, the question is, where do we want our dollars to go? And so I think corporate taxes are going to go down. For other things, we'll see what happens. But here's something that just came out this week, the cost of our wars. Now those SOBs attacked us, and we did what you have to do when somebody attacks. We went after them like crazy. But we've been in Afghanistan for 17 years. My war was Vietnam. We figured out eventually that we didn't have a clue, we didn't know where we were going, and so we got out of it. We don't have a clue, we don't know where we're going, we're going to have to get out of it. But look at the cost. And what's sad about this is we've lost a lot of lives, but this money, this $5.6 trillion, was all borrowed. And we have to pay interest on it. My friends, we have to, and I know this is serious, so my joke's going to come soon because you guys look like you need a joke. This is serious. We need to take what's going on in our country as seriously as we take college football. Because that's serious. People get in fights, they get hurt. They send people to jail for putting poison on trees. This is much more important than that. I had this chart last year. The numbers have gone up. We have been addicted to something that none of you can do in your business. Let's just borrow more. Let's just borrow more. Let's just borrow more. It's not going to make a difference. Just borrow more. It doesn't work. I go across the country, and on Monday I'm going to be in Nashville. Last week I was in Tallahassee. And the message is the same every place I go. I want Americans to finally decide that what's going on in our country is as important as football, and do something about it. Because there's no way we'd let a football coach get away with this. And think about a football coach saying, I'm so glad to be. You pick your school. We're going to be 25th next year. We're going to break the top 25. We're going to be number 25. And if we're lucky, after 10 years, I'm going to get you up to 22. As we say in Texas, that dog don't hunt. If you're not promising us going to the national championship, then we're not going to hire you. If you don't make progress in that direction, then we're going to fire you. But if you are blowing up our debt, we'll just say, whatever. How does that make sense? It's for President Trump's budget. Look at where the money is going. I had a chart like this from last year. The most important number is, on the left, interest on the debt. It is now 7%. Last year it was 6%. Why is that important? We're talking about $4 trillion in federal spending, going up 100 basis points on $4 trillion. That's a lot of money. But if you look on the chart on the right, the pie chart on the right, it's talking about what the Congressional Budget Office expects to grow the fastest. As the third or fourth fastest growing area is interest on the debt. And remember, my friends, it is interest on the debt, not paying principal. This is the biggest crisis this country faces, and nobody's talking about it. And we have to talk about it. This problem has to be solved. We can't play the grease game of just saying, well, everybody will take a haircut. Why is it a big problem? Look at these numbers. These are numbers from the U.S. Department of Treasury. I updated them last night, so the September numbers. We talk about China. They're beating our butts so bad. And I've heard anybody from Georgia complain that Auburn played better. They said our boys didn't show up that. And we got to get something fixed. There's something wrong. We should not have lost. And definitely should not have gotten whooped. Shouldn't have happened. But when we talk about China, they're not playing well. Excuse me. I got to be decent on that. Almost said a bad word. Do not believe for a second what the politicians say about what we're going to do to hammer China. Because all China has to do is say, you know, we're tired of you abusing us. We're going to go back to 2008. That's right, 2008. We're going to go back to our 2008 levels of investment. We're going to dump $1 trillion of treasuries on the market. Or we just won't buy them. What happens, let's see if I can get this thing to work. What happens to interest on the debt if the Chinese tell the market they're going to walk away from $1 trillion of financing our debt? What happens to the interest? Does it go up or down? A little or a lot? It blows up. So they got us. And if you add Hong Kong and Taiwan, oh, by the way, little Cayman Islands, they have a GDP of $3.2 billion, and they own $267 billion of our debt. So you know that's money laundering. We're in a position where we can't expect our creditors to be nice. And we can talk about beating up with them, or beating up on them. We cannot do anything other than say, thank you very much for continuing to finance our profligate spending. Our deficit spending is going down. It's now projected to be about $350 billion. But, come on, work for me, work for me. Our debt keeps going up. The number of today went up by about $30 billion since last week. And it's just going up and up and up, and we have to do something about it. Let's keep going. One of the issues we talk about is immigration. And let me tell you, this is a country of immigrants. We came here either by choice or not by choice, but we came here. And immigration is a key part of what we do. Why is that important? Here's some data on tech. And I started off talking about what's going on in tech. Let me translate tech into immigration, into money, into your businesses. Immigrants, first generation, or second generation, have been a crucial part of growing our economy in the tech space. And if you look at these numbers, these are crazy numbers, right? These are real numbers. You take immigrants out of tech, you take tech out of America. We're having a conversation about immigration right now, and two senators, one Republican, one Democrat, have introduced something called the RISE Act. I completely support it because it says let's move our immigration policy towards what Canada and Australia have, where you get points based on your education, based on the skills you have, based on your ability to add to the growth of America's economy. If you think about that evil guy who drove a rented truck down a bike lane in New York City, he was an immigrant from Uzbekistan, truck driver. For the life of me, I don't know why we need to import truck drivers from Uzbekistan when we can import people who are computer scientists. But I can tell you right now at my university, I have some of the most brilliant kids who've come here, paid full dollar because they don't get in-state tuition. They get education at the University of Texas at Austin, graduate education. We're sending back. That truck driver from Uzbekistan brought 27 people over, relatives of his. That makes no sense. And so I'm hoping that as we understand the role that immigration plays, we don't become anti-immigrant because who wants to get rid of this, but we become more intelligent about how we play the game. Because of these companies, which are kind of major, there's only one, Microsoft, that wasn't founded or co-founded by somebody who was a first or second generation immigrant. So I don't know about you. I don't believe in taking the gun, putting it at my head and saying, okay, if you don't do what I want you, I'm going to kill the idiot. I believe in doing things the smart way, and we need to have people understand that immigration is not just, some people coming across the border illegally to work and wash dishes. Immigration has been a crucial part of the growth of our country, and we need to continue to make it possible for the right people who bring the right skills to come here legally. I have kids whose wives, they have work permits, H-1B visas, whose wives are computer scientists, are doctors, who cannot work. And I know people who are here without any papers who are working. It doesn't make sense to me. We need to make it possible for us to get the right people here. Let's talk some more about tech. One of the things that people are talking about is, Chinese are taking our jobs. Well, the Chinese were taking our jobs some. There's no question about that. But the real data shows that productivity was the biggest destructor of jobs. Productivity is, how do you get more out of one person? And we know how you do that. Instead of somebody walking to school, they ride a bike to school. Instead of riding a bike to school, they ride a bus to school. How do you add technology to increase the productivity of workers? I first saw this when I was in China. So I go to China a lot with my students, and also I have a lot of Chinese relatives. And I was stopping over in Taiwan talking to a guy who's the CEO of a company called Delta Electronics. It's a company nobody's heard of that has about $6 billion in revenue, and they make all the little things that make PCs work, including fans and power bricks. And when I was telling him I was taking my kids to South China, he said, "Oh, we have a small plant there. It's a new plant. Why don't you come visit it?" His new plant in Dongguan, China, a little city I'd never heard of with 6 million people, had 38,000 employees. And so we went there, and we saw what we expected to see was a lot of young men and women making things by hand, but we also saw a lot of other things there. A lot of computer-controlled lathes and other technology we didn't expect to see. And so I asked the general manager at the plant, I said, what was the most expensive piece of technology they had installed? And they said, well, we just finished installing a $1 million laser cutting machine. I said, why? He said, because we can't get as many people as we need. In the Pearl River Delta, which was manufacturing central for China, in 2008, there were 5 million jobs they could not fill. And that has continued. So one of the movies that we see is the low-cost manufacturing movie. And the low-cost manufacturing movie is you compete on the basis of low price. And as you get more and more business, the workers say, we need a piece of this also. Their wages start going up. And eventually their wages go up enough that some other country comes in and competes on the basis of low cost. So China no longer is the low-cost manufacturing location. And a lot of their work that was low cost has now moved to Vietnam, to Cambodia, to Ethiopia, to Nigeria. It's leaving China. And they're replacing it so they can continue to grow their economy with technology. And so in the United States, if you look at these numbers, technology, robots, software, tools, is more responsible for the loss of jobs than anything else. And the strategic inflection point is that this revolution is getting ready to pick up. So you may not know about Vinod Khosla. He was one of the co-founders of Sun Microsystems. He's also a big VC. He makes this claim, which a lot of people think is, oh, this is crazy. His best investment was Google. When the Google brothers, as I call them, came to him as grad students at Stanford, they said, we're going to take down Yahoo. Remember when Yahoo was something worth taking down? Now you just don't admit you ever had Yahoo stock, right? We're going to take down Yahoo because Yahoo's the big search engine and they're screwed and we're going to do bad things to them. And he said, no, yeah, right. You're grad students. Leave me alone. And they kept coming and he decided, and he says, I gave them $800,000 so they'd leave me alone. I have not found anybody who would do that. But if there's anybody here, I will stop my speech right now. I'll go home and I'll never come back. Just see it. And he said it was the best investment he ever made because he was the first major investment on what became Google. Now think about Google. And think about what he's just saying. When you go to the doctor, what do you do? When did you start feeling bad? And every question the doctor asks and every answer you give her is going into a database where they're narrowing and narrowing and narrowing down what's possible. What were you eating? Did you go to the bathroom? Did you notice what you did when you go to the bathroom? All of its data points so they can narrow down. There's something called Watson, if you've probably heard all the ads. Watson has a supercomputer that IBM has that can read every medical journal report that comes out within 5 minutes and then put it into its database of all the other medical journal reports. And any question you ask, it goes through all this data and says, okay, it's likely you have this. And what we've been able to find right now is that there are now software programs that can look at x-rays, digital x-rays, and they can detect breast cancer and other cancers far more accurately than humans can. Because they can see more than we can, and they don't forget. And so he's predicting that doctors are going to be at a point where 80% of what they do can be done better by computers. Think about this. For those of you guys who have prostates, and hopefully that's everybody in the room, because if you don't, it's not a good day. There's something called prostate cancer, and if you know about it, you've heard about it, you don't want to get it, but the good news is it's 98% curable. But it requires surgery. And if the surgeon does a good job, everything's fine. If the surgeon doesn't do a good job, well, there's a part of you that you won't recognize anymore. And we'll just leave it at that. So, this is a fact. Come on. Ugly baby glasses. You all have those parts, guys. I mean, at some place, hopefully you still have them. Anyway, that's not my joke. A friend of mine had to get prostate cancer. He's a young man. He's in his 40s. And he said, I'm too young to get it. I said, you have it? Yes. And he said, well, the doctor told me I had an option. He's a urologist. He's a surgeon. He could go in and do work. And he said, there's a 1% chance I might say, oops, and then you're not going to work very well. Or we can use that robot, surgical assistant, and there's a 0.00001% chance that it will go oops. So what are you going to do when it's set? And he said, I use the robot. He said, oh, baby, there's no question I use the robot. What if it's brain surgery? What if it's, and so you start to see what technology is starting to make possible. It's starting to give us degrees of freedom from error. Because doctors do oops. I mean, there's a guy, the crazy story of a guy went to Florida, he had diabetes, they were supposed to take off his right foot. They marked the wrong leg, they took off his left foot, and then they had to take off his right foot. So he lost his good foot and his bad foot at the same time. And of course, they got sued, but his feet were gone. Robots don't make that mistake, which is why they're going to become more and more important. Think about pharmacists. You get the equivalent of a PhD in pharmacy, and you know the interaction of drugs, you know a whole bunch of stuff. And most of the time you spend filling prescriptions with counting pills or giving people vials. Let the robots do it. And if you think about pharmacies, how many people are actually there filling prescriptions versus pharmacists telling you this is how to use it and this is what you should worry about? What if we get rid of the people? I remember going to the pharmacy once and, see, I told you I shouldn't talk about prostate cancer. These guys, don't check. You're not allowed to check yourself. That looks really weird, okay? I'm sorry. That's not my joke either. The challenge of this technology is that it's going to make our life better. At the same time, it's going to eliminate a lot of jobs. And our job is to figure out what we do to make sure that good people who are working really hard, who suddenly don't have jobs, have something to do. Because the numbers are frightening. And this is a revolution. This revolution of automation starting to eliminate jobs is a revolution that's going to come everywhere. It's not limited just to a handful of cities. Because these tech companies, as good as they are, they don't hire many people. So all these tech companies, eBay, Facebook, all of them, 3 million people. And what I'm seeing with the research I'm doing is that for every new job created by artificial intelligence and automation, there are anywhere from 10 to 15 jobs that are going to be eliminated. You simply don't need that many people to do stuff that a robot or a computer can do. And of course, it starts with people who are the lowest skills. So you haven't heard about it much recently, but there's this big argument about paying people who worked at McDonald's and Wendy's and other low-end jobs $15 an hour. And one of the reasons the $15 an hour protests have started to die down is because Wendy's and then McDonald's announced that they're going to put kiosks at the front of all their stores. So you walk in, you pick what you want, you push a button, and then you use your credit card, and it's ordered. And in Silicon Valley, there are people who are working on automating the back end, so that as your order goes in, there are robots that are able to prepare your hamburgers, cook it, and deliver it with no human intervention. Now people say that's not possible. 2006, Philips Electronics, who makes electric shavers. I have not ever figured out why people want an electric shaver, because it just immediately starts getting dull and duller and duller. But people like it. They closed down their Chinese plant that made electric shavers and opened up a plant in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. The Chinese plant had thousands of workers. The Netherlands plant had maybe 15 workers, because everything was done by robots. And they said, we're able to make razors, electric razors for the European market, 2006, for the same cost it took us to make it in China, except it's in Europe. So what do we have to do with the headaches of getting it shipped from China to Europe? So they shut the plant down. That's 2006. This revolution is continuing. We have the most educated workforce in the history of America. 40% of our kids who are going to work have college degrees. But we still have an attitude that somebody is going to go to a trade school or vo-tech school, community college, junior college, is somewhat lesser. My kid is a valedictorian in his class, and he's going to become an electrician. How many people say that? Or even worse, my child has decided to become an elementary school teacher. Now think about it. We don't have people who are proud in doing that. I know people who are teachers in school because they couldn't get jobs working for the post office. That's not the way it's supposed to be. The key is that these are the jobs least likely to be taken by robots in our lifetime. It require fuzzy learning, being able to say, oh, what the heck is this? How did this happen? Because the things humans can do to devices, software, it's really hard to figure out. How did that happen? How did that get there? Your arm? Why is your arm in there? How many of us are encouraging kids to get those jobs? We want them to get a job like us, with a fancy tie and a business card and working our you-know-whats off, and these folks are making a lot of money. I'll tell you this is my M.B.A. students hate it when I say this. If you had gone to a vocational school or a community college and became an electrician, and worked as an electrician for 10 years and then became an electrical contractor, you will make more money in your lifetime than anybody going to get an M.B.A. unless they're real lucky. And if you've ever dealt with electrical contractors or plumbing contractors or welders, you know what I'm talking about. The price is whatever they say the price is, and they may show up. Okay? But here's something that hopefully you'll find valuable. The driverless car revolution is coming, and when it gets here, it's going to take everything that we take for granted about driving cars and make it useless. So right now, there are a lot of new commercial real estate developments that have drop-off zones in front. Remember what used to be there? Parking meters. 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, not sure what the number is, but we're going to start to see driverless cars coming, and when driverless cars come, you don't need parking garages anymore. You don't need parking lots anymore. You don't need Jiffy Lube. You don't need gas stations. You don't need Goodyear. You don't need tire stations, Firestone. You don't need auto dealerships anymore. You don't need used car dealerships anymore. There are no more meter maids. There are no more parking meters. There are no more speeding tickets. Somebody says, oh yeah, can't wait for that, right? That is coming, my friends. The only issue is how quickly. It is coming. And so if you're in commercial real estate, you need to start thinking now about how do we repurpose all these structures, all these spaces that are built for us driving our cars, because the data is very clear. We use our vehicles 3% of the time. Do you know what your car is doing right now? It's costing you money because you're paying for it, or it's depreciating, but it's just sitting there waiting for you. And when driverless cars come, what my friends who are looking at this say is you'll be able to get wherever you want with a vehicle showing up to your house or your business within 3 minutes at a 40% discount on what you're paying for a car right now. 40 is a big number. And a lot of people are going to say, I think I can do that. Okay? And think about how many people have done Uber or Lyft. I'm getting in a stranger's car and going where I want to, and I'm not worried about it. Well, what if there's no stranger? It's just a robot. That's the good news. The bad news, what if you've done something bad and the government says, we're going to have you go someplace else? But that's another issue. We're near the end. So here's something you've seen before. This is the world we live in, where more people live there than the rest of the world combined, or as I did before, if you take the green of Western Hemisphere and throw in Australia and New Zealand, you have the same number of people who are in half of India or half of China. This is the world we live in, and why that's important is this. This is from the United States Central Intelligence Agency, the people who spy on everybody, including us. It's using purchasing power parity, which is how much does it cost to build a building in their country without using anything that's imported. And they feel that's the best way to adjust for manipulations of their local currency. We're still number 2, that's the good news. But most people have never thought of India being number 3. And how about Mexico? Where's Canada? We have no problem with Canada, but we don't like Mexico. We don't like the 11th largest economy in the world. Why does that make sense? Look at these numbers. Or how about Indonesia? How many of you know that Indonesia is the 4th largest country by population in the world, just behind us? And then look at the growth rates. There's a revolution, or a set of strategic inflection points going that are crucial. And why is this important? Look at this number. Some people in the campaign said that American companies going overseas or selling overseas were not being good American companies. But if you're in the smartphone business, the cell phone business, where do you want to go? I mean, look at the ugly baby glasses. There are a ton of people, 3 times as many people have smartphones and cell phones in China, and 10 times as many people who don't. So that's where you have to go. Or let me flip it over. That's where your competition is going to come from. Remember Toyota? They're still here, and with Lexus, and Nissan with, what do they have, Infiniti, and Honda with Acura. 3 of the most dominant competitors, foreign competitors. They grew out of a country of 130 million people. BYD is a car company out of China. Its goal is to become the #1 electric battery producer and electric car producer. Charlie Munger and, what's his name, Warren Buffett? They own 10% of BYD. Most Americans have never heard of BYD. You're going to hear about BYD soon. They're very serious with what they're doing. So if Toyota can come out of a country of 140 million, think what's going to emerge from a country of 1.4 billion people. To give you a sense of how significant, we're near the end. I know I'm putting you to sleep, bud. We're near the end. We go back to 1985. I can't read it from here. What does it say? China and emerging Asia. What's that number? Huh? What percent? 18%. And what does it say for last year? How do you go from 18 to 63%? By kicking serious, you know what? By being focused, by being disciplined. We have, if you want to think Georgia felt bad. For Georgia of the loss to Auburn, the same way this has happened, the score would have been 4,000 to 10. We have a new set of competitors who are serious, who are focused, who are disciplined, who are wanting the world to be like it was in the 1400s when India and China were 60% of the world's GDP, and they're going to get there. And so the one thing we can't say is you can't do that. We've got to figure out how to compete. Because they already are mostly there. In fact, here's the data. If we look at the blue bar, that's trade between advanced nations. And that's a few years ago, right? You look at the orange bar, that's trade between advanced nations, developing nations. Look at what's happened in such a short period of time. We don't hear this on talk radio. We don't hear this on television. If you look at television or listen to television news, nobody's talking about this stuff. If you add our debt and this transformation that's going on, it's time to get dead seriously. It's time to get a new coach, get new players, build a new stadium, do something. Tennessee has a good football program. They won the national championship. When they fired Butch Jones, there was a statistic that came out that shocked me. They have a losing record to every single team in the SEC. They've lost more than a losing record under Butch Jones. Excuse me, how do you do that? Which is why he's a good man, but excuse me, we're not paying you to be a good man. We're paying you to win football games. We have a challenge to who we are and what our economy is going to do, and most of us in the business community are acting like, who cares? And we can't, which is why I'm here. I got a joke for you. Because this is what we do well. We have an education system that's the best in the world. Let's talk about unicorns. Yep, the Unicorn University. Unicorns are privately held businesses that generate over $1 billion in revenue. We are the unicorn machine. It's what we do. That's why we have kids from all over the world coming here. How we educate kids is very different than the rest of the world, whether they're from Europe or from Asia. We actually expect them to think and talk and make sense in class, and if they don't, bad things happen to them. It's not about memorizing and regurgitation. And we do a good job of creating it, but we have competition. The People's Republic of China is now becoming the creator of unicorns. They got a new football coach. His name is Xi Jinping. He's the first leader of China that spent some time outside of China. He spent time in Iowa, learned about our way of doing things, and he came back and said, we can do that. He just got reappointed as the leader of the Communist Party and therefore the president of China. And his goal is to continue to put his pedal on the metal. They're not going to back off. And so the question is, how do we compete? Because we have brands. We own 62% of the cloud between Amazon and IBM. We are dominant in e-commerce. And look at all these brands. We are either at our peak or we're just getting started. But we have real challenges. And so I'll end. You probably remember this picture from last week. But it's time for me to tell you the joke before I go to this picture. So, did I tell you the Starbucks joke last year? No, I didn't. Okay. This is, my wife says, it's the only funny joke I've ever had. And you know how it is when you're married. They tell the truth always. So there's this old man, he was in a Starbucks. And it was warm in the Starbucks. There were a lot of people. There was a lot of energy, a lot of young people, and he was happy to be there. And then he realized that something that he had eaten was causing problems in his digestive system, and that he needed to relieve the pressure in his digestive system before he could get up and leave. And he said, but that's okay. The music is loud. It's this techno pop music or something, and what I'll just do is time my pressure relief to the music. And so he's just bopping, oh yes, feeling really good. And so finally his system is now calibrated so he could get up and walk, and he looks up and everybody's staring at him. They're looking at him, and he realizes he had on headphones. My one good joke. I'm going to keep telling that until I can't tell jokes, but it's a crazy idea of thinking that everything's fine and it's not fine. But you've seen this picture because I want to end with this in the quote. This is an engineer in Xi'an, China, working for an American company in their factory in Xi'an. And here's the quote that showed up in the New York Times 7 years ago. Of course, China will lead everything. That's what we expect Nick Saban to say. That's what we expect any football coach to say. Our goal is to be the best and to stay the best. That's what we expect any company to say. My goal is to see how small my profits can be for the next 15 years. I want to increase my profitability. I want to be more profitable. I want to increase my margins. That's what we expect anything in business and in sports. But when it comes to the competition of our country with other countries, we start whining. My friend, I have been, as you heard from the introduction, I've taught in a lot of countries. I've worked with clients in 30 countries. I've been to about 45 countries. We have been blessed to be here. And we had no control of it. You could not pick your parents, because if you could, you would have done a better job, right? We have been blessed to be here. This is the most amazing country. But like football, if we don't invest in making sure that we continue to be an amazing country, we can be like Tennessee, a losing record to every single team in the SEC. That takes skill to do that. Skill, right? I mean, look, Kentucky is winning games. I mean, good grief. I mean, what's going on here? And so that's it. We have a little time for questions, but I want to tell you, I am completely excited about our potential, because if us old farts don't get it, the kids will. But the issue is, what legacy are we going to leave our kids? Is it going to be a legacy of debt level of $22 trillion? They have to figure out how to pay it. Or in our lifetime, while we are still contributing, are we going to flatline that debt and start paying it down? Because we have a competitor that's looking at us and say, we'll loan you more money, we'll loan you more money. And when you can't afford to pay it, Here's what we'll do. You don't have to pay us back in cash. We'll just take land. The United States government owns 86% of Nevada. The United States government owns 40% of California. If you look at the east, at the west, the numbers, a third of Oregon, almost half of Arizona, a significant part of Utah, Idaho, some pretty neat places that they own, that we own through the government. And they'll say, if you can't afford to pay it back, we'll value the land and we'll do a swap. We'll retire the debt in exchange for land. That's a one-time deal that's not good for us, and I don't want to happen. So anyway, thank you very much for having me back. I hope I haven't depressed you too much. Thank you. Any questions? I realize that my timer, which is supposed to stop me from talking, didn't work, so we're over. But anybody have any questions? We have microphones if there are any questions. Going once? There's one question. Microphone's coming.
So speaking of debt.
It's good.
So speaking of debt, and currently we have some tax legislation in process. Does it concern you that dynamic scoring and a 10-year pricing schedule is part of the calculus of?
Yeah, we have to be hard-nosed about the impact of tax reform on our debt. It can't raise our debt. And so I was temporarily intrigued by the decision to take the individual mandate and put it part of the tax bill until I saw the numbers, and the individual mandate will reduce federal spending on health care by $300 billion a year. So, be quiet. My smartphone's talking to me and I'm not going to answer. So yeah, we have to do it because we can't screw this thing up. I think there is an appetite for tax reform right now, and I think the Congress will support it and the President will sign it. But it has to not just be debt neutral, it has to be something that that allows us to start to reduce the debt. Now the big problem is there are estimates of how, if we reduce corporate taxes, what that's going to do to the growth, whether or not we can bring the $1.1 trillion of cash that the big corporations have overseas back to the United States, and nobody really knows. Because right now, I was talking to people before the talk, the market's crazy, right? It continues to go up, continues to go up. We're all thinking that there has to be a correction, but when's it going to come? And so that's the problem with the scoring of this particular piece of legislation is no matter how good of a job they do, who knows what's going to happen next year or 10 years from now. But yeah, we have to make sure that this is at least debt neutral, if not, in my opinion, something that's going to reduce the debt. Okay? Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Well, it's very nice being here. I suspect I've guaranteed that I won't be back here next year, but that's all right. I enjoy being with you guys. What you're doing is very important. The fact that you're tied to education and also real business is something that's really close to my heart. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you again, John, for a wonderfully informative presentation. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to all of our table sponsors. We wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving and a happy holiday season. Don't forget our annual meeting on January 16th at Inslee Golf Club, and we are adjourned. Thank you.